Hello, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. And today we are going to talk about EB5 investment and green card options and some of the things that you should consider when you are going through the EB5 program. A few things before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded, so you will get a copy of it after the presentation. The other thing you'll get a copy of is the PowerPoint presentation that you see on the screen. We will send that out as well. And we'll also send out a guide, an EB5 guide that goes over a lot of the different things that we are going to talk about today. The other thing to keep in mind is that as you have questions, you can add the questions either to the chat function or the Q&A function, and we will get to all questions. EB5 is a fairly complex topic, so if you have kind of specific questions, then probably a good thing to do would be to set up a consultation with us, and we also will send out information related to setting up a consultation with us. Perfect, so let's jump right into it. EB5 is broken down into really two different areas. One is regional center EB5 and one is direct investment EB5. And they are very different, in the profile of people who invest in both of these programs is very different as well. So someone who's looking to invest in the regional center program is really looking for a fairly passive form of investment. So they don't really want to do a lot. They don't want to create jobs. They just want to hand over their money and really have someone else do it. And so that's really what they're looking for. And with that, you have pretty high administration fees. So this might be a project like, let's say, a government agency has decided, not a government agency, a hotel has decided they want to build a hotel, and then they're looking for investors, and they might be looking for 50, 60 investors, each of them investing the requisite amount of money, and then they say they want to do it through the EB5 program, because the EB5 people who give them the money can also get a green card. And when they do this, they can really charge pretty high administration fees. So sometimes the administration fees can be $50,000 or even more, sometimes a little less as well. And often the return that is being offered is very low. First and foremost, it's not guaranteed return, and then the return offered is very, very low. And this is not a guaranteed form of investment. It's an investment just like any other investment. One big difference between regional center and direct, which we'll talk about next, is that for regional center investment, the indirect jobs can count. So let's say in the example of the hotel that I just mentioned, if the hotel was going to have knock-on effects of other establishments opening up because the hotel was there, et cetera, or you have the hotel had deliveries and then that created jobs, then those indirect jobs can be counted in the job requirement, because really this particular area is made up of two big areas. One is investing the money, and the other is job creation. And we'll get to both of those in more detail. And when we look at direct investment, that's an individual who might have a business. So maybe, the person's on an E2 visa and they have a business and they want to get a green card, and they look at the EB5 program as one possible way to get the green card. And they want to have the control over hiring and the money and what's done with the business, et cetera. And of course, this is a program that doesn't have, it's your own business, so it doesn't have any of the administration fees, and you are really in control of everything. So that's they're definitely two completely different investor profiles that we see when we are looking at the EB5 requirements, whether it's a regional center or a direct investment. So now the crux of the requirements. And we'll point out when they're different for the regional center versus EB5 direct, but generally speaking, they're very much the same. So the crux of this particular green card is investment. So you either invest $800,000 or $1,050,000 in a new commercial enterprise. So that's a business that was started after 1990. So this can be a business that already exists that you're investing in, or it can be you starting a new business as well. So the difference between the two amounts will depend on whether or not the business is located in what's called a targeted employment area or not. And targeted employment area is an area where the national unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average, or a rural area is defined by the municipality. So that the amounts are $250,000 different apart in terms of and if you are but there are certain advantages of being in the $800,000 range, especially if you are a national that was born in India or China, and we'll talk about those as we go through. You can count much of what you spend in the investment amount, but there are restrictions. You can't include legal fees. You can't include administration fees that you pay for accountants and different things like that. So you do have to, kind of be careful of what you include, because even a small amount used for something else could, make a petition ineligible for EB-5. And the investment can be made over time. So that's something that it doesn't have to be made all at once, but it does have to be made before you apply for the EB-5. So the investment also has to be money that is personally held by the person investing, and not kind of retained earnings for a company. So if you have an E2 company and the E2 company, earned $2 million, and then the money was sitting in the account, and then next year you spent it, that wouldn't qualify for EB-5, because that's just money that the company earned, and it's not classified as investment. A few differences with E2 and EB5 is that E2, if you invest in if you buy a business, for example, with E2, that's completely fine for E2, but that wouldn't qualify for EB5. The money has to actually be invested in the business rather than the money given to the seller. The other thing is source of funds is a big difference. E2, it's a very high level review of the source of funds, whereas EB5, it's a much more in-depth view of the source of funds. So that's another big difference. The other big difference is E2 is country specific, and EB5 is not country specific. Anyone can apply for EB5. There may be longer waits depending on which country you were born in, but it is not country specific in that regard. Source of funds is a big issue for EB5. Like normally when you're applying at a regional center, the only thing you'll be looking at is source of funds, because the regional center may already have approval. So they're just looking at your source of funds. And EB5s do have a relatively high denial rate. I think it's around 50% mark, actually. And when an EB-5 petition is denied, it usually is because of source of funds. So that's something that you really have to, they're extremely exacting with respect to source of funds. So you have to have that arranged and be able to trace the funds and show where the funds have come from. This is only equity investment. You can't give a loan to an entity and call that EB-5. That doesn't work. Now, the job creation part is the other big part of EB-5, and you have to create 10 full-time jobs, and those are jobs that are to U.S. citizens or green card holders, and then also they are jobs that are not part-time, so full-time jobs to that group. And if you're doing a startup, you would include a business plan that shows how you plan to create those jobs over time. And the investment does have to be linked to job creation, so that's something to keep in mind. Definitely what we encourage people to do is to use E-Verify, so that they actually can document the qualified U.S. workers that are there, because sometimes people can give you false ID and things like that, and they do have to meet the requirement of being a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. So the EB-5 filing, the filing is made up of two pieces: the I-526 petition and the I-485 petition if you're in the United States, or consular processing if you're not. I said two, but it's really three. And then 2 years after you get the green card, you file an I-829 petition, and that's to remove the condition showing that you actually have hired the U.S. workers. So the program the regional center program needs to be reauthorized by Congress. The direct program does not. But there was a big issue a couple of years ago where it didn't get authorized, and then there was, everyone was really in limbo. So it was a big problem. So this time they reauthorized the program until 2027 and said that anything filed before September 30th, 2026 would be adjudicated. So this issue didn't happen again. The big changes was moving the investment amount up from 500 to 800,000, and the higher land only went up slightly, 50,000, because it was at $1 million before. And they made changes to the TEA rules so that the target employment areas could only be accessed by decided by the U.S. government. The other big change, and this really impacts nationals from China and India, because they're the two countries where there are major backlogs, is that they set aside 32% of the visas for specific types of projects, so rural areas, unemployment areas, and infrastructure projects. And what this means is that nationals from India and China that applied, for example, today, would skip the line in essence, because there are people who are still waiting, and but these new rules took effect prospectively. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other big change that was made was that you're allowed to file the I-485 petition concurrently with the I-526, and that's a game changer, given that the I-526 petition takes 4 to 5 years to be adjudicated. So that really gives people the ability to stay in the United States and live and work, because they can apply for travel and work authorization, and until their I-526 petition has been approved, again, which could be 4 or 5 years. Another change, we talked about the administrative fees. The administrative fees were never kind of included in the investment amount, but the change here was that you now have to show where you got the money for the administrative fees as well. They clarified that loans and gifts were fine. There was some, kind of debate as to, who the gift came from, but they clarified that the loans and gifts are fine. And then there was some changes made that allowed for the situations where people invested and then something happened. Like, let's say there was a hurricane or they lost their money through fraud or something. It allows them to kind of redeploy the investment to another regional center. And that definitely has some benefits. The other things to consider is that if you are doing a direct investment, you do have to invest the money in the business. You can't, just put the money in a business bank account in cash, and you can't just have the intent to invest. You really do have to invest. For loans and gifts, if you're getting the loans and gifts, you do have to show where the person who gave you the loan or the gift got the money from. And then because the timing, like, this isn't going to be adjudicated for several years, you do want to maintain evidence that the loan has been paid and that you have paid the gift tax on the item. So that's two things that you want to make sure that you have proof of, because they could ask for that, because it's going to be 4 or 5 years down the road. Again, we talked about considerations of purchasing a business. It doesn't really work for EB-5 in the traditional sense that it does for E2, because you wouldn't be able to count the money that you wouldn't be able to count the money that you used to purchase the business. So if you gave the money to the seller, then that money couldn't be used as an investment. So you'd have to reinvest the 800,000 or the 1,050,000. It doesn't matter how much you own. You can own a fraction of a percentage. That's another big difference with E2. If you're an investor, you have to own 50%, and you can't have any return on investment, like a guaranteed return on investment. And we talked about some of the differences between E2 and EB5 already. Okay, so let's go through this EB5 example. And so let's just say that, there's a person, Helen, she had an E2 visa, and she got the E2 visa in 2015. And she used the money that $300,000 to purchase a business. So she gave the money to the seller, and the business had 5 employees full time, and she paid legal fees of $40,000. And then at the end of 2019, she took another $500,000 that was given to her as a gift, and the person gave her the gift got the money through inheritance, and the person didn't put it in Helen's business. So she didn't put it in Helen's personal account. She put it directly into Helen's business bank account, and then when the money was invested, the company had 10 full-time employees, so they hired 5 more since she bought the company. At the end of 2019, she paid herself a bonus of $100,000 after the company made $1 million, right? So on January 1st, she applied for EB-5, saying she's invested $1.8 million, the 300, 500, and $1 million that the company made. And she also says she's already met the requirement for the 10 full-time jobs, because she has 10. And she plans to hire 3 or 4 more, but doesn't really want to. And her business is located in an unemployment area where the unemployment rate is 7%. So let's go through this and talk about some of the issues. So first of all, the $300,000 that she used to pay to buy the business can't count towards the investment. So the business that she bought, we would look at the year that the business was started, and if it was after 1990, the business might qualify, but the money that she gave to the seller, the $300,000, cannot count towards her investment. So we would have to look prospectively at what other money she invested. And similarly, the 5 full-time employees don't count. The $40,000, if she's applying today, we had to look at the source of funds of where she got that money from as well. In 2019, she got $500,000 gift from someone. So, better make sure the person paid gift tax. And then also, they don't care that the person inherited the money 15 years ago. You will have to show where that person got the money from and a really detailed trail. The other big issue is that the person who gave the gift put the money in Helen's business bank account directly, and so that Helen didn't actually have possession and control of the funds. That alone can be a reason for denial. If the money should have gone to Helen's personal bank account and then to the business bank account. When the money was invested, she had 10 full-time employees. So those 5 employees that she gained. So when the money was invested, she had 10 full-time employees. So the problem here is that none of those 5 employees can count towards job creation because she hasn't, up to now in this example, she hasn't invested any money in the company that counts towards job creation, right? Because the 300,000, we say that can't count, and she didn't invest anymore. So right now she's kind of at 0 for employees, when we look at in the EB5 world. And then the retained earnings, none of that's going to count, right? So that's just money the company made. And then you also have to be very careful if the owner is paying themselves a bonus if they've invested money, because she got the loan, and she got the gift rather in 2019, and then at the end of 2019 she paid herself $100,000, and that can be problematic. It looks like the company made $1 million. So depending on what the expenses are, there may not be a problem, but she can't pay herself from the $500,000 that she invested. So that you always have to keep track of things like that. And then because she's in an unemployment area, if you invested now, because 7% is definitely 1.5 times the national average, she would be investing the 800,000, but she hasn't come close to that yet. So would have to, would have a lot more to do before she could apply. Timing considerations, EB5 is taking 4 to 5 years for the I-526 to be approved. But again, luckily you can file the I-485. So you are able to work and live in the country and travel as well once your work and travel authorization has been approved. The country-specific quota, so India and China right now are backlog. But however, if you're applying under the high unemployment or rural area, the carve-out that I mentioned, 32% carve-out, then those are current for all countries. So if you're applying at a regional center, for example, then you're going to get the benefit of skipping the line, and it's still going to take 4 to 5 years to apply for the petition, but you can only file an I-485 petition if your category is current, right? So if it is current, that's useful. So dual intent considerations, if you have a visa, because this is going to take 4 to 5 years, you have to make sure that you have some underlying basis of staying in the United States. Some of this is solved a little bit with the filing of the I-485 if the category is current, but if not, you have to make sure that you're able to stay in the United States. And with that, you have to look at the type of visa that you have, right? So if you have a TN visa, that's not dual intent. Whereas if you have an E2 is not dual intent. So you may have trouble renewing it after you've applied for the green card. Whereas if you had an H1B or L, then that could be something that is useful to you. And a lot of time people will do, parallel green card strategies. They'll, apply for an EB5 and maybe an NIW, or they apply for an EB5 and then, have a marriage-based petition, et cetera. So there's nothing wrong with that, and it's not prohibited. So something definitely you could do. Excellent. So that is it for the webinar, and looking at the questions, and I know it's a complicated area, that might take a bit to digest, but I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So we will end it here. And as I said, we will send you a copy of the presentation. We'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint. We'll send you a copy of the EB5 guide and consult details in case you want to set up a consultation. We look forward to helping you. Thank you. Bye-bye.